Well, thanks for joining us today for the Productive Agent podcast powered by Aubrey Home Loans. Today, we have a really special guest, Karen Tiberius. She is with Alair Homes, which is a custom builder here in the Salt Lake market. Excuse me. So I had something pop up on my screen. I had to get rid of it. And Karen has been so she's with the Alair Homes, custom home builder. She's been licensed since 2000, and not only that, grew up in the building business, third generation in the home building business. How cool is that, right? You don't hear that every day. So her grandfather was a builder developer. Her father a builder developer. Her mom worked in the business with her dad, and then she got licensed, and she's been doing it. I mean, she grew up in the business. So anyway, we'll say hello, Karen.
Hey, thanks for inviting me to have this conversation with you. I hope that we can impart some really helpful information to agents when they're working with builders.
And that's the goal. I mean, the whole goal of Productive Agent is to, pass on information and bring on guests that can actually help real estate agents in their day-to-day business. And so what prompted me to call Karen up was she had put a post in the Utah agents, former Wasatch Front agents Facebook group that said, due diligence on land, because land is the big topic on everybody's mind. It's almost past, now that the homes have fallen off the mountain, for a couple of days now, it's almost old news now, right? But it's amazing. So we'll see what the latest news of the day is. But anyway, and I don't know if that prompted you to write about that or it's just timing.
That was one of the things that prompted me to write about it. The other thing that prompted me to write about it was somebody had put up another post about some challenges that they were experiencing with a builder and one of their clients. And I see those pretty frequently, and I really like to be able to help people as much as I can. And I think that a lot of realtors have negative views of builders that they can't, if they would just have conversations,
right?
Both builders and agents, that a lot of things could be overcome. So it's one of those things where I just want to be helpful to them. But at the same time, I think a lot of times builders demonize agents, and I think agents demonize builders. And really, we're on the same side. Builders want their homeowners to have a great experience. We won't be in business if we don't. And agents want to have a good relationship with builders. And we need to realize that we're on the same side, that we don't have mutually exclusive goals, and that we both are here to be good stewards for the homeowner. So that's really what I'm trying to get people to see each other as we're both people with the same goals.
And I agree 100%. It's always, you always want to have a good relationship. In defense of agents, that when the market's hot and the builders don't want to pay you or try and go around you and actually try and jip you out.
I know that happens, absolutely.
Yeah. And so, but also to and I understand the builder's perspective. They work with a buyer for 2, 3, 4 weeks, and then here comes an offer from somebody that's never even been there before. And I get their side of the story as well. So it ebbs and flows. When the market shifts, then the builders are like, hey, bring everybody. We don't care, we don't care if you're there, we'll pay you anyway.
So one of the things I can tell you is I've been on both sides of that.
Sure.
So I've been the builder's agent where I've worked with somebody. I've actually had a full contract, and all of a sudden I've had an agent show up.
Right.
And then I've also been an agent representing a buyer with a builder that I didn't work for. And I was out of town, and they went into a builder's model home.
That's it, right.
And then the builder said, oh, we don't need you to fill out that whole form. Just put your name, your email, and your phone number, and skip the I had an agent part, and then tried not to pay me. But thankfully, I had a good enough documentation that I did ultimately get paid. And so one of the things that I would encourage agents to do is appropriate documentation.
Yeah. One of my agents at when I had the brokerage, we had won a commission arbitration where we were able to document process, and that it was kind of weird, but the way the attorney walked us through it, and we got paid. And in fact, we even got paid more than what we were willing to settle for. We're like, because arbitration it's all or nothing. There's no splitting the baby. And so, we wound up getting a full percentage of what they had in the MLS of a certain price, which we understood that we didn't get paid that on all the money, but because it was arbitration, they screwed themselves,
Yeah. So I
So
mean,
anyway, excuse me.
both parties just need to do the right thing is what it comes down to.
Exactly. And we try to.
But, and as agents, if you're going to recommend that somebody go see a builder, just one of the things that you can do to protect yourself is just give that builder or the builder's agent a call and say, hey, I'm sending my clients down
Sure.
to X model, YZ model home.
Yeah, I'm out of town. Right.
Yeah, I'm out of town, but could you please take care of them? And I had done that, and that was what had protected me. So
right.
One of the things that I would encourage everybody to do is to be proactive, and then if you're not proactive, don't blame the builder later. Be proactive.
Right.
If you're going to represent,
just because you didn't do it, you were supposed to do it. It's not the builder's fault.
Right. So that would be the first thing. But one of the things that is the first thing, because I'm a little bit unique in a building situation.
Yeah, what exactly is your job? What do you do?
So I'm actually the vice president of client development. So all transactions begin with me. I'm also the lead estimator. So all initial estimation of the house starts with me. From time to time, I do actually project manage full build projects. The last time we did a parade home, I managed that home through the construction process and ran it all through the parade of homes. So I have a quite extensive building experience myself. I can build a multi-million-dollar home from start to finish by myself.
Sweet.
I don't need to be babysat by the builder that I work for, although I like to be babysat by the builder that I work for, because I know I'm a human and I can make mistakes. So that would be, but my official role is to be the one that really helps manage that client through the whole pre-construction, construction phase.
Kind of the liaison between the two, because the whole building process, is like there's sales side, which the salesperson, has communication with the consumer, the client, the homeowner, whatever. And then there's the construction side where they don't ever want to talk. They're like, those guys, they don't want to talk to anybody. And so they're, same thing in technology, right? The guys that actually do the technology, they're like, they need garanimals. I mean, they're just like, they don't know how to dress themselves, but they're like amazingly brilliant, right?
Yes.
And they don't know how to talk.
Lots of houses for people like that.
And so, and then so there's that part that's in the middle that knows how to talk to consumers and knows how to get the job done too, with either technology development or building, is a unique skill.
Yeah. So it's been really helpful to me. And one of the things that's most important to me with the specific builder that I work through, because we have a very rigid process, I have been through the process. So it's very easy for me to help clients understand that full process, because I've actually had to talk the talk and walk the walk. So the first thing that I do when I have a client come to me, if they've got land that they've already purchased, I want to find out as much about that land as possible. And so I follow a similar process that I would if somebody said, hey, I'm thinking about buying this land, right? Because ultimately, even if they bought something that's going to be challenging, I need to find out those same things about the land. So I had a realtor in our board call me a few weeks ago and say, hey, I have these clients that are looking at this lot. I want to make sure that they don't make a mistake. So the first thing that I asked him to secure from the developer was the engineered plat.
Right.
The reason why I need the engineered plat is because I need to be able to see where are all the utilities located, so that I know where things can be built and I know what the limitations of their build are. The second thing that I want, if it's a completed development, the second thing that I want is the actual as-built. So there's the plan, which is the engineered plat, but I want to know, how did it end up actually getting built? Because just like houses have red lines, subdivisions have red lines too. So what
do you mean red lines?
There'll be on the spot changes where we'll actually have we go in with the red pen. That's why they call it red lines, and we change what the actual
Well,
structure.
real estate and lending, redlining is not a good thing.
That's true. And lending redlining is a bad thing. But on house plans, it just means we had to make a plan change, and we do it in red ink so that the black
So
ink
it pops off the page.
right, and so that people know, hey, alert, this is a change, right? So I want to look at the as-built plans and see, okay, how did the utilities actually get run? Did they run into any soils issues when they actually laid the sewer, all what we call the horizontal improvements? So your house is vertical improvement, your utilities
horizontals are utilities and roads.
Yeah, so I want to see where those are. The other thing that I always ask them to get is a copy of the geotechnical report. Now, the one thing that's really interesting to me that has happened a lot is I'll have the realtor for the developer often tell me, oh, we don't have those. You have to have those in the state of Utah to get your subdivision approved by any city or any county. You have to. It's required by law. So if you aren't aware that they exist, I get that, but I really need you to get those for me. And
that's the same with trust accounts. Agents are like, well, my broker doesn't have a trust account. No, they have one. They just don't use it.
Right. So the other thing that I want to be able to see is any relevant CCNRs. So in some of these subdivisions in Utah that are really elaborate HOA situations like Red Ledges, the CCNRs are quite rigid. Promontory in Park City, the CCNRs are quite rigid. So in order for me to be able to give a potential buyer the best advice possible, I have to be familiar with what are the restrictions that are built in there.
What can I do and what can I not do?
Yeah, I mean, like in Promontory, I can't use an asphalt shingle. So I automatically know when I am estimating for a house there, it has to be a 6-figure roofing estimate. It can't be, 35,000, which is what you might have on your average house in the valley, right?
Right.
And so
what do you do, metal or slate?
You have to do metal or slate, or we can do zinc. There's a myriad of options, but what they want something, I mean, they get tremendous weather up there. And so you have to have something that's going to stand the test of time. Right. So, and
I lived in South Florida. We had cement tile roofs.
Yeah. And slate, it happens quite a lot, or there's actually composite shingles now that look like slate. There are cement tile roofs that you can do. And then one of the newer roofing materials that you're going to see pop up more and more is the Tesla solar roof tiles.
Right.
And those are a whole different story. We could go down that rabbit hole for about 2 hours. But if anybody wants to get some more information on that, we are a certified green builder. So if you have questions about any green technologies that you can integrate into the home, I could talk to you about that for probably about 4 or 5 days. And I would be glad if anybody calls me. I love it when realtors just call me for advice, even if they're not building with me. I had Wade Golden is become a good friend of mine, and he had some clients that were building with another builder, and they had a water meter that was right where they wanted the driveway to go. And they had purchased a home that had already started under construction. And this is one of those things that you want to look at the plat, right? It's going to show you where those water meters are. And then I know, hey, I probably should have the driveway on the opposite side of the lot.
Can you move a meter?
You can move a meter.
But
and
it's on your dime.
A little or a lot.
The city's not going to do it.
Right. The city won't do it for you. It is going to be an added cost to your build. And I've had meters moved that were $1,500 and I've had them cost $20,000. It just depends on where the connections are.
Right. And how far you're moving it.
Yeah. But Wade, when he called me, he wasn't aware that you could just move the meter. And so I was like, yeah, you can just move it. And then he called me back and he was like, oh, the builder's telling me it's going to be $20,000. And I said, well, that seems a little high. Why don't you go talk to this guy that moves meters for me and get a bid from him, so at least you can kind of gauge that. Because one of the things that you do have to understand is that there's certain momentum in your build.
Right.
And when you make changes, it does cause hardship for the builder.
It can, right.
And
you mess the cycle and it's like,
and especially if the builder's carrying the construction loan, there's tremendous risk to the builder and not necessarily as much risk to the buyer. Right. And so they've got over $500,000 risk in today's market, right? Their construction loan is on the hook for at least that much, even on your most basic production house. And so I would just ask you to have a little bit of compassion for the builder in that they're paying per diem interest. So if he has to stop everything to move a meter, that can be a little bit challenging. And
Right.
that's going to be part of that cost of moving the meter. So
Sure.
you have to,
Yeah.
there has to be some give and take with people, right?
Yeah, there's a phrase, we always hear the phrase COI as, you know, center of influence, right?
Right,
The coaching company that I train with, they call COI as cost of inactivity.
right. And
And it's your most
there is
expensive
cost of
cost.
inactivity on your build. And so it's one of those things that's why a lot of people get upset about the dreaded change order fee, right? But that's why you have $1,000 change order fees, is because there is the cost of the interruption in the flow of just the build. And then also there's time that it takes for us to actually research what the change is. Can it be integrated? Sometimes we've ordered material that we can't return. So there's lots of things that go into that. So I just ask people to try to take like a little bit of a step back and not approach it from an emotional position. There's a really great book that I read about a year ago, and now it's escaping me, but the author is Trevor Murad, and he talks about taking the position of neutral. And that's what I try to do. Anytime I have somebody come at me with an emotional response, I try to approach it from neutral and understand that they could be emotional, but that doesn't mean that I have to be emotional, and try to take it from a neutral position, because then we can get to a place of understanding and overcome the problem that we have. Getting back to doing some due diligence on the land, and specifically, I want to go back to the geotechnical report because this is extremely important.
Right.
One thing that I'm looking for on the geotechnical report is the summary of the soil conditions. That's the first place I'm going to go to. And I want to read through there and see if there's any evidence in the summary that there were any collapsible soils or conditions that are not conducive to a house building. One that I read recently said that for certain lots that they were in a washout zone. If we had flooding, you could have it wash out into your lot. So, and my client was considering that lot. And so I said, hey, look, if you consider that lot, understand that this is the risk that you're assuming when you buy that lot. But you don't have collapsible soils in there. So and how I figure out where the collapsible soils are is that if I'm reading through that summary and it says there's collapsible soils, it will usually tell me where are the test pits in the subdivision that those collapsible soils were found. And if you have a large subdivision where you've got like 50 test pits, you might have 5 test pits that showed collapsible soils and other test pits that showed none. The other
large subdivision, you can have totally different dirt.
Absolutely. You could have a myriad of conditions. And the other thing that I'm going to look for is water table in the test pits. So, and that's part of why they do test pits too, is to check for where's the water table, because that's going to tell me if I have water at 2 feet, am I doing a basement?
Right.
Probably not without a lot of risk, foundation drain that's hooked to a land drain that has sump pumps, all those things, right? You can do them, but there's things that you have to go through as a developer
to clean
off of the property so you can have basements.
They call those raised ramblers.
Yes, that's why you see a lot of raised ramblers in areas where the water table is high. There was a subdivision that we worked on in Lehigh where initially they did test pits and the water table was at about 2 feet, but then they went and they put in a full land drain system. Once the land drain system was put in, the water table dropped to 15 feet and now you can have basements.
Got it.
Now, that being said, you still want to think about, okay, this used to be at 2 feet. So what are the precautions I'm going to take that 100-year flood event, you know, and we're going to have that event. This is the year we're going to have it, right? Because we just had 900 inches of snow in Utah, literally 900 inches. So
well, not only that, if that dirt's been sitting in water for 50, 60, 70 years, I mean, it's really not dirt, it's mud.
Right. and which can be good or bad because it depends on what was the organic composition of all the dirt that was in there. So one of the things, if you go to the Alair Homes Salt Lake Facebook page, there's actually a video on there that I do with Jeremiah Cano. He's the owner of our office, where he talks about collapsible soils. We dug for a foundation on a home, and all indications were that we weren't going to run into collapsible soils. But one of the things that builders are required to do in Utah is get a soils technician report after we excavate for the home to confirm that the soil conditions we thought were present are actually present. And sometimes you find out they aren't.
Right.
So one of the things that we found is in the area where the garage was going, there was actually collapsible soils. And so the soil technician in his report said, you're going to have to excavate the garage down to the basement level, to put the footings at the basement level to protect the stability of the garage. So the thing that was great about that is that gave me the opportunity to go back to my homeowner and say, look, we're going to have to now do 3 walls at 10 feet high, same as the rest of your basement. We have the opportunity here. You're going to have to pay those costs regardless. That's part of the build. We have to do it. It's required. We can add 1 more wall and a concrete lid on it, which is called a suspended slab. And you can gain 450 square feet at a cost of $28 a square foot. Would you like to do that? Right. And so these are all the opportunities you have if you have a builder that's being full disclosure with you and is willing to work with you to make these decisions together. So that would be the one item of due diligence that I would encourage you to ask a builder is, are you a full disclosure builder? And a lot of them are going to use the word transparency, but I think that word is being abused and not used correctly.
Right.
If they can disclose all their bids, they can disclose, their percentage that they're marking up your build. But if they're not disclosing how much time they're actually spending on your project, then that's not full disclosure. If they're not disclosing the fact that they own their framing company and their cabinet company, that's not necessarily full disclosure. So you want to look at all those things, and maybe you don't care about those things, but if you do, ask those questions. Getting back to the collapsible soils, one of the things that people need to think about is if you see collapsible soils in the lot that you want, that doesn't mean you shouldn't buy the lot. It just means you have different decisions to make. So
it's just like any home inspection. I don't care what's wrong with it. How much is that going to cost?
Yes, exactly. So one of the options you have is you can excavate out all those collapsible soils until you get down to that native level. And then you can do one of 2 things. You can either have a taller basement, or you can bring in what's called structural fill. And I don't know a whole lot about the situation in Draper, so I don't want to necessarily get into that. I don't work for the builder, and so I don't know all the nitty-gritty details. But what was reported on the news is that that's what fell there. So the reason why I bring that up is because if you have a situation where somebody has brought in structural fill, there's something else you can ask for that will help you complete due diligence, and it's called a proctor. And that's on how the structural fill was brought in and it was compacted. So
it's called a what?
It's a proctor. You want a proctor in the structural fill, right? And so some of the things that we look for when we use structural fill, it has to be compacted in 6-inch lifts, right? You don't want to fill it full of 6 feet of fill and then try to
tamp the top,
because you're only going to get 2 feet of compaction at best.
Right.
But when we do structural fill, we actually compact with water. There's lots of things that we do. There's a myriad of things. And then they test each level to say, okay, what's the density here? That's what the proctor will reveal.
Got it. So
that's your more due diligence. And then one of the things you could do is you could take that to an engineer, a civil engineer or a structural engineer, and say, is this going to be sufficient? Am I going to be protected? Right. So it's just like an inspection. When we have radon show up in a house, we're going to contact a radon mitigation specialist.
Right.
Same thing here. You're going to contact an engineer. right? And they're going to help you determine whether or not this is a deal killer. It doesn't have to be. The other option that you can have is you can peer your project, right?
You can what the project?
You can peer it.
Here,
You-
yeah.
Yeah. So a company that we've developed a really good relationship is called Goliath Tech. They're a local Salt Lake company. Darcy Mock is awesome to work with. And so there's sometimes when we decide that a peer would be a better option than a footing,
Right.
because maybe the soil conditions, but sometimes it's because when we come back through and we do an inspection later, we might find that, hey, maybe the engineer missed this or this, and we want to add a spot footing to help carry this load.
Right.
And so you can add piers fairly easily, and you can retrofit your house with piers if you notice something going wrong. I know that an instance of a house that somebody called me about that was having some issues. They were initially told that they just needed a couple of piers, but when I took that to Darcy, she's like, no, they need 50.
Wow.
Right. And so you want to make sure it's sufficient. So get third-party verification.
Right.
I am a child of the 80s, so I remember Ronald Reagan during all the talks with the Soviet Union on nuclear arms, and his mantra was trust but verify. And
Right.
I think that is extremely wise advice here. Trust but verify.
I'm the same way.
And it's one of the things we have to remember about our real estate contracts in Utah is caveat emptor, buyer beware. When you sign that contract, it says, this is a legally binding contract. Make sure you understand it before you sign it.
Right.
That puts the responsibility on you, buyer, to do appropriate due diligence. So
Right.
if you haven't done it, you can't, it's not necessarily that the builder is a bad person. It's that maybe I didn't even know what I didn't know.
Right.
Because I didn't consult the appropriate individuals. So if somebody has a question, you're always welcome to call me, even if we're not going to be the builder. I love helping my fellow agents, but at the same time, I would tell you, we can be hired to do due diligence on your lot, and I do it all the time.
Oh, wow. Well, that's a nice feature, huh?
Yeah. So we just do mini contracts for something like that. I've had them be as little as 1,200. I've had them be 5,000. But if you were building a multi-million-dollar home, would you not think that $5,000 investment in making sure this is the right lot is better than
it's a no-brainer
mistake, right? So to me, I think it's an investment. And I tell people to think about it, just like, would you ever buy an existing home without a home inspection? Would you ever, I mean, if you're getting a loan, even when I have clients that pay cash, I always recommend appraisal.
Yeah.
Because I want to be sure, right? I want to have a third party verify I'm not paying.
Well, I was
right?
given the option of, I'll pull the comps, and if you feel good with it, if not, we can order appraisal, no big deal.
Right. So I always encourage it. And if they choose not to, that's their choice. But I'm one of those people that likes to do a little bit of CYA. And I do explain to them, yes, I'm a project manager for a builder, and I'm licensed as a realtor.
Right.
But I'm not a CPA, not an attorney, not a tax advisor. So if you
that's why we have
an appraiser. So I encourage you to hire one. So
that's why we had the buyer sign that buyer due diligence checklist.
Absolutely.
That document has saved many agents in a quarter.
Oh, totally. So that's kind of in a nutshell what I do on lots. So just to kind of sum that up, the first thing.
So that's your due diligence just on the lot itself.
Just on the lot itself. Yeah.
So what kind of due diligence can a buyer and or agent do during the building process?
So during the building process, one of the things
without annoying the builder.
Without annoying the builder. Well, some builders are going to be annoyed because they just don't want to do it. And then you just have to decide if you want to work with them. But
Right.
One of the things that I see often on our agents groups is complaints about the builder. You know, they're demanding $40,000 non-refundable deposit. I think that's ridiculous. And I'm like, why is it ridiculous? Just because you say it is.
Right.
He has risk. He wants to protect his risk. If you guys choose a bunch of stuff and then you walk away and he's stuck with
These purple
your
cabinets.
choices, then, and I've had that happen, by the way. We don't build specs anymore. We haven't built specs for about 6 years, but before, when we did build specs, we had some people choose some pretty crazy things, and then we're stuck trying to sell this house, right? And so,
or replace what they chose, you know.
Right. So the other thing that I would tell you is, if a builder is asking for 40,000 non-refundable and you think it's ridiculous, don't buy it.
Right, just don't do it.
It's that easy. Don't buy it. Move
Right.
on. Nobody's holding a gun to your head. Don't buy the house. And don't say that the builder is a bad person for wanting that. Just say, it doesn't work for us. Move on.
Right.
Again,
Some of those times I don't like it.
yeah, it's that thing about coming from neutral. So there's 2 other books that I've read multiple times that have really helped me as I have worked with people on these types of issues, to help come to a negotiating position and not have it become adversarial.
Right.
So the first thing that I'd recommend is, it's by Chris Voss. It's called Never Split the Difference. I've read it. I love it. I've read it at least 6 times, and I could probably read it 16 more and never get tired of it. The second one, which has become my fast favorite, is it's called Find Out Anything from Anyone, Anytime.
That's a good one.
And the thing that both books emphasize is the importance of asking good questions and not making assumptions. And again, it goes back to being neutral with Trevor Mawad. If you're seeking understanding so that you can overcome a problem, everything, as Jerem would say, is figure outable. I always tease him, that's not a word, but it is always something that can be figured out between 2 parties if you're both reasonable.
Well, and I actually categorize people by, you know, those that say, well, I don't know, you know, that kind of like, or those that'll say, well, we'll just figure it out.
Right.
And those that, you know, to me, I find it's just an observation. I mean, there's no science behind my research, but I find that the people that say, well, we'll just figure it out, tend to be more successful because they just get things done. Where people go, I don't know, they kind of, I call them Pac-Man, you know, they gobble, 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 and they hit the wall. It's like, you got to come over and like turn them so they go the other way. It's like, but when they hit the wall, they stand there. It's like, okay, turn, you know, and start gobbling that way.
Yes. So how do you do due diligence on your actual project as a build if it's a custom home? I mean, production homes are a lot easier because they're something that's been replicated over and over again. So they pretty well know their costs. But you have to remember that every time you're building a custom project, it's a prototype. It has never been built before.
Right.
So anything that I tell you in terms of costs, unless I have done appropriate due diligence, is a guess. Right. It's an educated guess, but it's still a guess.
Yeah, it's still an estimate.
Right. And the thing is most of the people, when they come to me and they ask me, how much is this going to cost? I remind them, I just met you. So I don't know what is in your head versus in my head. And one of the examples I like to use is, I had somebody say, well, I want a white kitchen. And I said, okay, help me understand what that means to you. And it turned out she wanted dark gray cabinets with white countertops.
Right.
That's not a white kitchen to me.
No, white kitchen is white floors, white walls, white cabinets.
Yeah.
White
And the only thing that was white was the countertops.
Right.
So it was really important that I asked her that. And so one of the examples I like to give with people is, when you're thinking about a custom project, and this goes for renovation or builds, is that your definition is always going to be different from someone else's. And it's like, when I talk to the women, I ask them, where do you shop for your groceries? I'm a foodie. I'm a little bit of a snob. I love Trader Joe's, I love Whole Foods, and I love Harmon's. They're not the cheapest grocery stores.
Right.
Where do you shop? And what's in your bag of groceries versus what's in my bag of groceries? Because I'm a foodie. So I guarantee you my per bag groceries is higher than yours. So when you ask a builder for a price per square foot, it's a totally loaded question. All square footage is not it's not equal. So if I have a house that's 6,000 square feet, it's a 6,000 square foot rambler, and it has a 312 roof versus a 1212 roof, the 1212 roof is way more money, right? And so I have to know
10-foot basement ceiling versus 8-foot.
Right. And I have 2 6,000 square foot ramblers we're building right now in the same neighborhood. And they are about $400,000 apart in price. And one of the reasons why they're $400,000 dollars apart in price is because one of them has a 3,500 square foot attached garage.
Right. That's my kind of garage.
Right. So the actual garage footprint is larger
Then
than
the
the
house.
main
Yeah,
floor of the
3,000
house.
square foot footprint with a basement at 35.
Yeah.
That's my
Yeah.
kind of garage.
So it's just one of those things that is like, it's like totally depends on your situation, right? And so you've got to think about what is this situation versus that situation. So how we do appropriate due diligence on a build is we go through a whole design process. We do a detailed scope of work on everything down to the last knob. So I'm going to know what tile you picked, what's the grout joint, what's the grout, and I'm going to have a installer bid it exactly how you want it
The
designed.
way you described it, right?
Right. And so then I can be reliable on this is the price. Because
Right, as long as that's what you agreed, I mean, the buyer wants, because sometimes you have to walk,
Yeah.
like you said, they don't know, the white kitchen, it turned out, basically white countertops.
Everyone thinks that if I have plans, I'm ready to build my house.
Right.
You're not. You're not
Ready
even
to bid.
all you have. You are ready to bid and you're ready to design the
Right.
interior, right? But that's all you have. And so that's like 10% of what goes into a project.
Right.
So doing appropriate due diligence on a build is going to include full structural designs that are fully engineered for your lot.
Right.
It's going to include a detailed scope of work on everything down to the last doorknob. And it's going to include bids that correspond to every scope of work.
Right.
That's full due diligence on a build.
And that's as close as you can get. I mean, sometimes you run into things. I mean, I used to be a house painter, so I didn't do a lot of new construction, but every once in a while, they run into something like, okay,
Yeah.
we can do that.
Well, like collapsible soils underneath the ground,
Yeah.
right?
Well, they were way past that when I got there.
Yeah. But that would be an example. And then know that you need about a 10% contingency.
Right.
Because you might run into
things happen.
Soil. So another example I'll give you is a few years back, we had somebody come to us and they had bought a lot up in Suncrest that had an abandoned foundation on it. And they wanted us to build those house plans on top of that foundation. And I had to explain to them that we couldn't do that because we didn't know what was done. Right. And so we ended up yanking out that foundation. We designed a whole different house. And when we sent the soils technician out there to actually do the testing of the soils prior to pouring the new footing, when he was digging around, he found between 4 and 6 feet of literal garbage beneath the footings on the previous home. So based on what we saw this last weekend, that's
right.
what
You're gonna put a house on top of that. The weight of that, it would just like fall out.
Yeah, and it was like there were tree trunks, there were pop cans, crumpled up window wells, Romex, all those types of things underneath
Just
there.
garbage construction.
Right. So what we did at that point was we went back to the homeowner and said, this is what we found. We didn't anticipate this. Here's your options. You can have a 12-foot basement. It's on a slope, so it's going to be a walkout. It's going to be beautiful. And you're going to walk into that 12-foot basement and say, wow, I can fill the value of the $80,000 extra this just cost me.
Right.
Or we can bring in $80,000 of structural fill and you can keep your 9-foot basement and you can tell people about how you spent $80,000 on structural fill. Which would you prefer?
Right. Yeah, let's go with the wow factor.
Yeah.
Especially if it's costing the same amount of money. Let me have for my buck.
Yeah. So needless to say, we did the 12-foot basement and it's gorgeous. So
Sure.
it turned out well, but you just have to be prepared that the building process is a roller coaster. You're going to have all kinds of ups and downs and things like that. Emotionally accept that going into it. You're
Right.
going to have things go wrong. And if you have a good build team, you can work it out.
I tell borrowers in loan process, I'm like, just remember every day I'm going to ask you for one more thing.
Yep.
And I'm going to ask you for stuff. Like I had one guy, the borrower, he was actually a licensed real estate person. And he's like, well, why do you need that? I'm like, because it's on my checklist. I mean, it's like, I get a list of things we need and I'm telling you what we need. We can debate all day whether we need it or not, or you can just get it for me and then we'll close. It's like,
Yeah.
I'm not making the decision. It's the guy with the
Who's writing your check?
that's making a loan. Yeah.
Right. So all of these things that I'm talking about are designed to help mitigate risk. That doesn't mean there will be no risk.
Right.
But
you'll have less surprises.
Everything possible to mitigate risk. Do you want to do the least possible? Or do you want to this is your home. If it's where you're raising your family, and for most people, it is the largest financial investment you will make in your lifetime. But more importantly, if it's your home, it's your largest emotional investment. How much risk can you tolerate?
Oh, like those people down there in Draper watching their houses fall off a cliff.
Yeah. And so
I don't know if you saw what I posted. The garage door was still standing. I'm like, I want the name and number of that guy that installed that garage door.
Yeah, no kidding.
The house fell down, but the garage door's still standing.
Yeah.
Like, crap.
Yeah. So it's just one of those things that you got to think about. And I know that, that is a really tragic situation.
It really is.
And I actually know a lot of people over there at that builder, and they're decent people. They're not out to ruin people.
Things happen.
So I actually feel quite badly for them, and I wish them the best. And I know that they'll figure it out because they're extremely intelligent people. So
I never judge by I don't judge by what happens. I judge by how you respond to it.
Yeah. So one of the other things that motivated my post last week was that somebody had written to me privately and let me know that they had a really terrible situation where they found out that their builder was under investigation, and because of that, they couldn't get their loan. The lender wouldn't approve it because of that builder being under investigation. So brings up the final thing of, how do you do due diligence on a builder?
Right.
The first thing that I would encourage everybody to do is ask them for their contractor number. In the state of Utah, you can check with the Department of Professional Licenses, DOPL is known by for short, to find out if they've been in trouble.
Right.
Trust but verify. I always say that. Google your builder, but understand that every builder has somebody that's unhappy.
Oh yeah.
No matter how you make a pancake, there's two sides to every story, right? And so you got to look at that.
I say there's three: yours, mine, and the truth.
Yes, that's true. So you got to be able to. You
have to be able to cipher through it.
Right.
That's not.
So the thing that I encourage people to look for is, do you have status alignment? Do you have the same values? So one of the things when I have somebody come to me that's interested in engaging us for a project, we go through a series of questions with them because I'm seeking status alignment. So like one of the questions that I ask, for example, is, are you the type of person that likes to plan everything up front, or do you like to plan as you go? Okay. So
that ain't gonna happen.
I'm being neutral with how I've worded that, right? But there's only one right answer for me. That is that you plan everything up front, right? So if somebody says to me, oh, I just like to plan as I go, I just kindly explain to them that doesn't really work for us. It's not part of our process. So we're probably not the right fit, but I can recommend you to these people who might be a better fit.
Yeah, because they're just going to change their mind all the time.
Right. Well, and the thing is we don't care if people change their mind. We actually don't charge a change order fee because our whole process is about, house is about you, not us. It's custom. And if I'm charging you a change order fee, I'm discouraging custom, right? But what we
that's true. Yeah. Change order fee is no longer custom.
Right. What we do charge you for is an hourly amount for how much time it takes us to complete that change, because it's the cost to us, right?
Right.
And then whatever the cost of the change is. But we don't have the extra change order fee, which most people have. But the reason why they have it is what I'm explaining to you, because it takes time too. And it changes our momentum on the project. So that's the reasons why builders have change order fees. It's not because they want to be jerks and not make changes. Well, some of them might be that way, but those are few and far between. Most of them, it's because there's a cost to us, and I can't absorb that all for you. I'm a for-profit business, and I won't stay in business that long.
Right.
The second thing that I would encourage people to ask their builders is, how do they fund their projects?
Right.
One of the things, most of our clients get their own construction loans. If somebody really wants us to carry their construction loan, we will, but there's an extra fee for that because it's added risk to the builder. So I always encourage people to look for builders that are risk averse, because they're going to be there after we have a shift in a market like we have right now. There's going to be some builders that go under, just like they did in 2008, right? And do you want a builder who's going to still be able to service your warranty next year?
Right.
So
Or finish the house.
Right. So you need to test their risk averseness. And if you have a low risk averseness, then you want to choose a builder that is averse to risk as well. Right.
Right.
So the second thing I would tell you is, if the builder is carrying your construction loan, well, I would ask you this question: how hard do you think it is to fire that builder?
Right.
It's impossible.
Right.
So
yeah, because they're interwoven
about that
now.
very carefully, right?
I mean, yeah, they're interwoven. I mean, you guys are joined at the hips.
Well, the builder actually, in order to carry a construction loan, has to own your lot. So you're going to have to basically subordinate your lot to them if they're getting your construction loan, if you happen to own the lot. Or the builder's going to have to purchase the lot on your behalf. But either way, they own it, you don't.
Right.
So you need to understand that. So I would keep that in mind, and not that I think, I don't feel like our clients have reasons to fire us, right? But don't you want that option if you need to?
Yeah, I mean, things happen.
Mm-hmm. So I would read through their contract very carefully up front so that you understand fully what you're getting into.
So this is more of a build contract versus buying new construction contract, right?
Right, right.
I mean,
if you're gonna buy a
Acme
spec
Builder,
home,
right?
yeah, you just do due diligence like you would on an existing home. Honestly, you're going to do an inspection. I would caveat that with, I know there's some builders out there that require you use certain inspectors, that you can't just choose your inspector.
Yeah, that should make you nervous.
Yeah, I'd have a little bit of a problem with that. But what are you afraid of? And that would be the other thing, is I encourage people to actually have their new home inspected, because I am not afraid of third-party verification. I think third-party verification is great, and I want to encourage it all day long.
Yeah, I always say get a meth test too.
So sorry, somebody's at my door and I'm just giving them a code to get in.
Oh, got it.
Anyway, somebody's coming. Sorry about that.
You're perfect.
So I would encourage you to do, even if you're doing a custom home from scratch, still have a home inspection done, because guess what? Sometimes builders find out, because of a good home inspector, that a sub missed something or flat cheated them.
Right.
Right. And there are people that do that. So this was not a builder that I've ever worked for, but my mother, it was a builder she worked for years ago. And she had him build her a home, and we had an inspection done. And when the inspector got in the attic, we found that for a whole foot around the entire perimeter of her 4,600 square foot Rambler, there was zero insulation, zero. And can you imagine what her utility bills would have been like?
Right.
So, and it was kind of funny because
but then the sub's charging the builder for
for the full insulation, right? And he argued with the inspector and said, it's up there. And he said, look, I've got pictures, it's not there. And they made some bets, and it was funny, but the insulation got put in as the moral of the story. So I would encourage you to have it inspected. And any builder that's worth a grain of salt is not going to be afraid of third-party inspection. So again, it's that trust but verify there.
And I understand the builder's perspective. What the builder doesn't want is, Uncle Slappy built a house once 40 years ago, and he's now going to be the home inspector. Like,
No, but and have those inspectors with you at your four-way walkthrough, right? So I don't represent buyers very often, because my main gig is here with Alair Homes. So I don't really represent buyers or sellers. But if you share DNA with me, or you're one of my husband's employees or something like that, then I will be glad to help you. So that would be the one thing I would tell agents. If you call me, you don't have to worry about me trying to poach your buyer, because I don't have
not what I do.
So feel free to call me. But I one of my husband's employees wanted to buy a new house. And it was a production builder. That's actually a pretty dang good production builder that I know well. And we went and we walked through on the 4-way, and I pointed out to him that his sheathing on the exterior of the house was over penetrated in multiple areas and he needed to replace it, and gave him a list of a myriad of other things. And he looked at
What is
me.
over penetrated? What does that mean?
They shot the nail in too deep. So when you penetrate that sheathing, you're going to compromise the structural integrity.
Got
right?
it.
So
they got the nail gun turned up to 80, you know?
Yeah. And in some places, the nails were sticking out like a half inch. It was ridiculous. And so I'm walking through and I'm showing him all these areas. And he looked at me, the superintendent looked at me and he said, I passed my 4-way. And this is when you have to be like a little bit forceful. And so I had to look at him and say, Mike, you and I both know that superintendents get to be buddies with city inspectors.
Right.
And if you have a good relationship, they're going to ask you, are you done? And you're going to say yes. And then you know dang well that you have this X, Y, and Z problem. And I said, I know you passed your 4-way, but I also know that these are code violations. So you could either fix it, or I'm going to have to call that inspector and let him know that I found these things.
I'm going to open up a can of worms.
Can you just fix it? Right? Can you just please fix it? You and I both know. So, I mean, I can tell you, when I've personally project managed a house, I've had an inspector pass me, and then later I found something he should have helped me on.
Got it.
And I fixed it, but he passed me.
Right.
So they're not imperfect. And the city inspectors are like, they're making like $70,000, $50,000 a year. Right. They're not highly paid people, and they have.
Well, they're not highly skilled. They're making a lot more money.
Yeah. So I
mean, that's just the reality of it. Not saying they're bad people. It's just that
no, they're not.
If you're highly skilled, you're going to do more and make more.
Yeah, I had a city where I know a lot of the officials asked me if I was interested in an inspector job once, and I told them, I'm sorry, I couldn't take the pay cut. You need to pay your inspectors.
Right.
You know, so it's one of those things that you just have to
write the number and slide it across the table.
Yeah,
see their reaction.
Pay attention to your 4-way. And if you're going with your buyer that you represent on a 4-way inspection, go ask your home inspector to come with you. Pay him an extra $150.
Or find somebody that's more versed in construction.
Yes. And one of the things that this would be another thing that I would tell you is really imperative that you do on a 4-way walkthrough, because 4-way walkthrough in the state of Utah, it's all your rough trades have done their work. So your rough plumbing's in, your electrical, your HVAC, your footing foundation, your structure, your roof's in, right? So you want to make sure that you videotape. It's right before insulation and before drywall, right? It's about the halfway point on your house. Videotape every single room 360 before you do that. The reason why this is important is because your homeowner is going to want to put up shelves afterwards. And if you don't want them to nail into a pipe, you want to make sure that they're looking at where that stuff is. Now, we have nail plates around pipes, you know, all the time. We're required by code to have those up. But a nail plate doesn't extend across the whole pipe. It's just the areas where you're most likely to accidentally have a penetration, right? And you don't,
and what people do is like, there's no telling.
Right. And I can't tell you the number of times I've had a drywaller accidentally bury low voltage wiring for speakers or whatever. They've buried lights, they've buried HVAC duct lines, they've buried the most recent one I had was they buried a central vac line, which I could see because it was bowing out really bad. And I'm like, what's this bow? You know, and then we go cut it out and it's a central vac port. So that stuff happens. Your house is being built by humans and we are all imperfect. Work with your builder to achieve as much perfection as possible. But if they accidentally miss something, just say, hey, I noticed this. Can you help me figure out what that is? Another thing that I just want people to kind of be aware of right now in terms of building, and this isn't necessarily a due diligence item, but it will just help you avoid some extreme frustrations. Okay. We've had a massive building boom in the last 3 years, massive. We've had lumber shortages like crazy. Part of
labor shortages.
Yeah, labor shortages, because in 2009, that was the peak employment in residential construction. And if you look at the number of bodies that are employed in residential construction now, as opposed to 2009, there's about 150,000 fewer bodies.
Wow.
When the market crashed during that time period, people left construction and went on and did other things, and they didn't.
Left the state. I mean, a lot of them come to the state because of construction jobs, and then they leave.
Yeah. And so if you're wondering why labor is high, that's why.
Oh, yeah.
And then everybody sent their kids to college and nobody encouraged them in the trades anymore. That's a whole nother story. But so you got to think about those types of things. So some of the things that we've been dealing with in the last 3 years in terms of material quality is you can no longer get grade 1 lumber. And so when you can't get grade 1 lumber, you're stuck with 2 or 3. And let me explain to you what that means. It means when the lumber arrives on your job site, it's not fully cured. And so we can fully frame a house, and I can go measure every rough opening. I can hold a level up to every rough opening. And when I come back in 3 months, that lumber has fully dried out now.
Right.
And I have a bow in almost every wall. So understand that that is happening right now. And it doesn't mean your framers were horrible. It doesn't mean your builder was horrible.
Right.
It means we can't literally get as good a material as we used to. So keep that in mind.
I get it, but something I hadn't thought about.
Yeah. And then the other thing that's really challenging right now, there's another, I'm kind of a turbo nerd, Rob. I probably read like 5 books a month. So I'm going to throw another book out there. And I just finished a really good book. It's called The End of the World is Just the Beginning by a man named Peter Zion. He's a global strategist. And in this book, he talks about how demographics are going to change the way we live, especially in the next 2 decades. So we've had this really fat pyramid, right? Where we have this big young generation and a few old people at the top. That pyramid's in the process of inverting.
Right, because because you got the boomers and the boomers. Well, they're just going to live longer. So that changes the whole dynamic.
Yep, it does. But it's changing the type of people that can perform work on your jobs. So we're going to have to broaden our horizons. It's changed, the capital that's available in the market. The last group of baby boomers started retiring in 2022. So now they're not working every day and they're starting to pull their capital out of the market. Interest rates were always going to be where they are right now, because of that very fact. So as your buyers, as a realtor, as your buyers are worried about interest rates, help them understand we've been artificially spoiled for the last decade because the government
3% was not normal.
Interfering in our market. If you look historically over time, the average interest rate is actually about 7.4, and we're about 1% behind that right now.
Right.
This is great. I bought my first house at 8.25, and that was good at the time.
I bet. I was waiting for him to go down below 10.
Yeah. So
refinanced at 7.
Yeah. So people are going to adjust to this. Right now, people are having a hard time with it and they're a little bit scared, but this is going to be a little bump and it's going to work out. And if you read that book that I just mentioned, you're going to feel a whole lot better about the situation we're in right now. And hopefully.
What's it called again?
It's called The End of the World is Just the Beginning.
Oh, okay. The End of the World.
And it's by Peter Zion, and his last name is spelled Zeihan. And he has a podcast that I've become completely addicted to, and I highly encourage people to listen to it.
Sweet.
So I don't know if there's any other questions that you have for me, but that's kind of like a good summary of, what I do when I look at a building project. And I think if everybody would kind of approach it that way, I also would really encourage builders to be more willing to disclose, because I think a lot of the conflict that we have, especially between builders and agents, is simply a lack of information and a lack of disclosure. And if you just disclose, everybody would be fine.
Yeah, they say that, like in real estate contracts, that most court cases are boiled down to some kind of disclosure.
Right.
Or lack thereof.
Right. And if you just disclose, you're always going to be okay. So,
well, if it's disclosed and the buyer continues, well, there's nothing they can do. I mean, they can't come back after you anymore.
Yeah. And people, again, it goes back to that trust but verify. People who have nothing to hide nothing.
Right.
So if you just disclose, then it could all be worked out. And people understand that builders need to make a living and need to build. Sure. We need to be able to, we're a for-profit business. We're not a charity. And people understand that.
I don't apologize for my profits.
Yeah. Yeah. And as realtors and builders, I think it's so important that we understand how important we are to each other. We have like a 30,000 unit shortage in the Wasatch Front area, from what I've read.
Right.
The only way we're getting out of that is through building, because people keep moving here.
Right. Well, and we keep having more.
Yes.
I mean, we're not going to run out of first-time buyers.
Yes. So we need to be friends. Let's not be adversarial. Let's just be friends. And if anybody ever has any questions for me, if you want to job shadow me for a day, I would totally let you do it. I am an open book and love to share information. Please call me anytime.
Well, I want to see the houses before they take CO, because I like to go in and get inspired with big houses, you know.
Oh yeah, so fun. Go to the Parade of Homes. Check out, the local Parade of Homes. We've got the Utah Valley Parade comes up at the end of, or it's in the middle of June. So just after Memorial Day weekend. And then the Salt Lake Parade, I think it got pushed this year. I think it's going to start on August 11th. And then you've got the
That's because August 10th wasn't hot enough, right?
Well, it's, they actually typically start the last week of July, but a lot of us had some really big challenges with the weather this year.
Right.
I have a project that we're building up at Solitude Ski Resort right now. You would be absolutely blown away with the amount of snow we have dealt with on that project.
I know. I saw pictures that looked like they were just driving through a luge tunnel, you know?
Yeah, I have a picture that's like that of me driving to it. And it hasn't been that much better in the valley. We've been dumped on so hard, and it's really interfered with our building schedule. So I think they decided to shift that. I haven't heard officially, so I don't want to speak for the Salt Lake HBA, but you can check with the Salt Lake HBA for the official times. What I've heard is they're pushing it to August 11th. So go and enjoy those houses. Ask the builders questions. Find out how they learn to do the things that they do. There's new technology in building all the time, and we love to share information.
Yeah, I've been out of the painting business for many, many, many years, and the materials today are like, I don't know anything about it. Yeah,
and part of the challenge with painting is that freeze that keeps happening in the Texas area. That's where a lot of those materials are made, and they're made because the weather's pretty stable. But they have freezes there that completely destroyed their materials.
Any waterborne product, right?
Yeah, and so it just, paint freezes, you can't use it.
No, right. Because then, no, exactly.
So it's caused, those types of weather anomalies have caused a lot of prices to go up. And then again, because of these demographic issues that I was talking about that are explained in that book, we've had our market structure change as far as materials. We've been a globalized society, and we're going to be turning into ourselves again. We're going to see a lot of stuff coming back to the United States. There was a really great report that ABC did. Oh, I think it was Diane Sawyer, where she talked about all the construction products that are produced exclusively in America and how you can avoid some of the material challenges if you would choose all American made products, because the distribution issues. And then secondly, like as part of that report, she talked about how there's a nail company that's domestic, and then the Chinese nail manufacturers. And when they compared those two products side by side, the American nails had less jamming problems in the guns. So at the end,
so you save $10 on nails, but you spend hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars in labor aggravation, you know?
Yeah, yeah. So think about those things. I mean, we have a domestic window producer that is local to Utah.
Right.
So there's all kinds of opportunities there, and think about those kinds of things as you build.
Right.
You'll
Well,
have a better experience.
this has been fascinating. Because you're just like unbelievable amounts of knowledge. It's mind
Oh,
blowing.
thank you. Well,
In
I
every
told you I'm
direction.
a turbo nerd.
What's that?
I'm a turbo nerd. I wear it like
Turbo
a badge of
nerd, right?
honor. Yeah, my kids call me a turbo nerd all the time, and I tell them I wear it like a badge of honor.
You know it. You know it.
So anytime, Rob, if you ever want to do this again, let me know.
So if somebody wanted to get a hold of you, how would they do that?
You can reach me through email, and it's Karen Tiberius, or Karen.Tiberius, and it's T as in Tom, I, B as in boy, ERIUS at alairhomes.com, and that's spelled ALAIR, and then homes with an S.com. Or my phone number is 801-471-9114. Call me anytime.
Right. And if you're a realtor in the Utah realestate.com market, I mean, you can just look her up in the MLS.
Yeah, you can look me up there too. And you can email me on my MLS account or at my Alair Homes account.
Sure.
I check both frequently, and again, I have a handful of agents that do call me pretty regularly with building questions, even though I'm not necessarily participating in their project. And it's just
Sure.
they have questions, and I'm happy to help them find the right answers. And I might not have it, but I'll be able to tell you where to get it.
Absolutely. Well, man, this is like more than I bargained for. That's for sure.
Oh, that's so nice.
Excuse me. So, well, thanks for joining us, Karen. I mean, this is awesome. And for those that are listening, thanks for joining Productive Agent Podcast. So remember, you got Karen Tiberius with Alair Homes. And this podcast is by Productive Agent, and a Productive Agent podcast powered by Aubrey Home Loans. So if you ever want to get a hold of me, it's just 801-999-8209 and Rob at Aubrey.net. So I mean, if you know my name, you know my email. So it's Rob at Aubrey.net. So thanks everyone. Have an amazing day.
You too. Bye-bye.